So, New York Times and many others reporting on the Sam Bankman-Fried interview by Andrew Sorkin at the New York Times' summit. And then here's the $1 million question: did he do it in person or remotely? Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Remote.
Remotely.
Remote.
We've
I
got some.
watch it.
We've got a bunch of
We
smart.
got some smart cookies in here.
Everyone who knows what's going on knows there's no way in hell he could do that live. So
So did he do it with an avatar versus showing his face too? Just kidding.
he it appears to be his face. I need to, Cheryl, if you could pin that to the top of the room.
Yep, I'll do that.
I need to reinstall my paywall jumper, which will take 2 seconds.
Tyler, I sent you a link on the Twitter back channel directly to you, a way to like bypass that paywall. There's a site that you could go to bypass it for all those paywall sites
Yeah,
for news.
I've got an incredibly good one. Yeah, usually it updates like once a month, so I have to update it.
Happy World AIDS Day, by the way. It's December 1st.
Okay, now we're good to go. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Refresh. Here we go. FTX.
Oh, that headline is amazing. I listened to part of that interview live, and this guy is, there's a piece missing from Sam Bankman Fried. And he's like, he has no responsibility. I mean, by taking responsibility in precisely the way he has, he is he's doing something that I think is so clever. I mean, he's like, he admitted it all. So what are you going to, and apologized for it. So what are you going to do to him? You
Oh,
know,
he's just prepping the jury and future district attorneys coming after him.
oh
So
yeah,
he's trying to lessen his sentence.
that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. But I've never seen anybody, with the guts to do something like that. So I'm saying he's missing an emotional piece, because usually you'd be too afraid to come out there and speak in public like that, or you'd have a lawyer saying, don't do that because, you might incriminate yourself, yada, yada. He is so sure that he's smarter, than any of these people, that he's willing to talk to anyone. Andrew Ross Sorkin didn't really let him off the hook. It was a tough interview, and it went on over an hour.
Somehow I bet that if guys like him, especially what he was dealing with, he probably has so much other information that our investigators are probably looking for other, let's just say, people who function in dark spaces, that he's going to get a light sentence for helping in some other cases that we'll never know about. But yeah, he's probably pleading to the jury and the judges right now.
Okay. So there were no punches pulled from the moderator, the interviewer,
I
Francie.
didn't think so. No, I didn't think so. He asked him a whole bunch of questions, and Sam Bankman Fried said, um, yeah, I did it. Um, I, I can't believe I did it, but I did it. I can't believe how little I knew, but I didn't know very much. I can't believe, how many, you know, dollars were in these accounts, but there were more commingled dollars than I was ever aware of. I mean, it was like, yeah, I agree with you. Every time Sorkin said something, Sam Bankman-Fried said, "Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it? I thought that was all fixed, or I thought that was, or I didn't have anything to do with that company. I thought we were out of Alameda Research. I was very busy running FTX, and it
There's a,
was total plausible deniability."
that makes me think, Dr. Frantin, there's a couple of things that I always try and treat like unknown chemicals. One is money, especially complex financial derivatives, and the other is software, because again, it's highly complex. So I treat it with a certain skepticism and want to get a sense of the fundamentals before plowing into it. So with this whole crypto bubble, as you know, I've never strayed a foot outside of Bitcoin. I've looked at that, said there's an amazing innovation. Everything else is BS on a technical level. And even if it wasn't BS, it's too complicated to reason about. There's no way I can tell you that it isn't. And that's a bit like, messing with a bunch of chemicals and saying, you know what, I think this water stuff is probably all right. It's a good innovation. It's okay. But all these other things that could look and almost smell like water could be deadly. And it's too hard to reason about it. If you ask somebody to reason why that's the case with some novel chemical, they can't be sure straight away whether that's going to do you harm or not. It's complex. So, I mean, I can't believe people are making multi-billion-dollar companies when they don't understand the substrate. I bet you could ask 2 or 3 questions about the fundamentals of how these things actually work at a code level, at a basic level, they wouldn't know. And yet they're building companies off it and custodying billions of dollars of people's money. I don't know that for sure because I don't know what they know, but I don't think you need to go through many founders of crypto companies before you find 1 or 2 that do not fundamentally understand the substrate they're dealing with. That's
But
how you
hang on.
get poison.
That's the issue with crypto companies. He's not alone.
So the Bloomberg version of this interview says in his New York Times interview, SBF gave few straight answers while admitting to gross errors, denying claims of fraud, and claiming he "quote unquote" didn't knowingly commingle funds, which is the main issue, isn't it? Um, it and the question is, I don't know that it matters if he knowingly did it or not, right? I mean, you're
You would
guilty,
have to know what the law is.
right?
I don't know what the actual law is.
And he also
Where's
keep
Jennifer?
denying he keep denying having no having oversight of this Alameda. He keeps saying that he's not running that, although he owns that company.
Well, he's saying, yeah, I wasn't trying to commingle funds. Okay, well, but you did.
He used the word
Well,
collateral a lot.
that's the point. He wasn't trying necessarily. I could believe that, but he certainly couldn't prove in a simple way that he wasn't. And it's quite obvious when you look at how these things work that he must have been. So it's concerning they're not doing their research before going off, especially when dealing with other people's money. So that's the nature of all Ponzi schemes, to be honest. The people involved don't realize they're involved in something insidious. The scheme is bigger than the individuals involved. They all think they're doing something good and yada yada. I don't realize that the box that they are in is in itself an insidious system. So it's difficult until you stand outside of it to realize that. I used to be involved briefly in an MLM and I got out of it because of the ethics of the thing as a whole. I was doing great as an individual salesperson with it. And then I stood outside of it and said, what the hell? This system just exchanges social capital for the people who get in early. You just turn relationships with your friends and family into money to enrich the people who got in early. And sure, I could do that and win at it. Sold my father-in-law some dodgy vitamin pills. But when I realized what the system as a whole was, I got back out, despite the fact I was growing and could have made lots of money. Just got to zoom out from time to time.
Hmm. Pressed on whether he had been straight about FTX, he said, I was as truthful as I'm knowledgeable to be.
Oh,
What
that's
does that mean? Exactly what I'm saying.
So he's trying to
That
claim
that
stupidity.
quote is in the perfect.
Yes,
That is the
exactly.
perfect summary of what he
Oh,
just
oh,
said. I am as truthful as I'm knowledgeable to be, but you are responsible to be as knowledgeable as necessary, and that's what's missing.
Right? Exactly what you say, Tyler. Shady or stupid, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it always comes down to shady or stupid. And he's trying to say he was shady. No, he's trying to say he was stupid.
That's totally against his previous image and created.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
but
that's
that
why it's
usually work
completely
in
in the
white
face.
collar crime. That usually works with the juries, right? Those guys usually get nothing,
They go to white collar criminal prison where they have exercise rooms. And
and they still have a 4 o'clock tea.
yeah, exactly.
Tennis courts and shit, yeah. I don't know.
Exactly what he said.
I mean, I don't know. That makes no sense. Nobody who claims to be that smart can so quickly claim to be stupid.
Well, he didn't claim to be stupid. He claimed to be ignorant. That's different. You know, there's certain parts of the business he claimed to not know. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is um, the regulators. Let's presume. I mean, this is a stupid presumption because the regulators are also crooked. But let's presume that the goal of the regulators was to get rid of interest in trading shit coins. Well, basically, they've done it. You know, that has happened.
Well, hang
They've
on.
absolutely.
He how let's think of this defense in a different context. He's saying, I didn't knowingly commingle take I love the I didn't knowingly use people's money in this highly illegal way, right? How different is that from a man cheating on his wife with another woman and saying, I didn't knowingly insert my genitals into their genitals. I didn't know. I didn't knowingly do it. It
Just
happened.
got caught up in the excitement of the whole pursuit, yeah, and the possibilities.
So, but does that make any difference at all legally? And how? I guess it does, or he wouldn't be trying to take this approach. Clearly, he and
So,
his
so
lawyers have.
Tyler, what about this notion that he's only 30, he's a young kid, and he was being used, or some people have suggested, he was being used by people, greater than him, and he's now going to get the brunt of it? Or is it he really is that intelligent and he just thinks he can outdo the system and cheat everyone off their money?
Isn't hey, you're spot on because isn't that what Holmes tried to do with Theranos, right? So all of a sudden she became, oh well, I was influenced by whoever this other guy from Pakistan was,
Sunny Bawani, yeah.
you know.
But that's not the point. They said his parents are, Stanford Law School professors. So, the thing is, there's really not a lot of law around this yet. I don't know. Jennifer, you're here. I summoned you. I
Still,
wondered
I,
where
I
you were.
argue with that point. What difference does that make? I mean, you don't look at a serial killer and say, "Whoa, his parents must have been serial killers as well."
No,
So
no, no, no. But I'm saying these are all the things that have come up, as sort of mitigating factors. He's a good boy. There's also this, he's earning to give it away. The effective altruism thing is mixed up
I
in
but
think
this.
it must
just
be the
before we get
case.
into the,
Hold
oh,
on. It,
sorry,
it's
go
got
ahead.
to be the case that his lawyers have done some calculus here, and they figured out they want to try and go for that he didn't know that apparently fraud or whatever the main charge is going to be. The sentence is much higher if it's premeditated and done knowingly, and if you commit some kind of fraud unknowingly, that it has some lighter sentence, and that's what he feels like is the most the smartest path option for him to take. is the unwittingly fraudulent path, because then it's kind of a compromise socially. It's like, I'm admitting I did wrong. Oh yeah, all day long. Oh, I'm wrong. I did shit wrong. Oh, yep, yep, yep. But it was unknowingly. So he's somewhat trying to participate in the court of public opinion of a sort of psychological compromise that yes, 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 I'm guilty. I'm not denying I'm guilty. I'm totally, totally guilty. But he wants to compromise on precisely what he's guilty of. He doesn't want to admit that he knowingly did this stuff. He wants to because that's a much stronger sentence usually in most type of
Hey,
scenarios.
Tyler, let me jump in on this for a second. So
Mens
let me,
rea, right? Is that right, Jennifer? Is
yeah.
that
But Ben, can you guys hear me? Let me just jump in on this really quickly. It's on that to your point. So, and I'm not sure where we are in the discussion. It sounds like he's trying to say, "Hey, it was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. I didn't intentionally do it." But on the legal side, it depends on what, as you said, the mens rea requirement is. So if I'm speeding, but I didn't know I'm speeding, too bad. There's not a requirement that I knew I was speeding. It's strict liability. Some other things have, as you like, you can look at murder, manslaughter, those things. Those are different mens rea requirements. Did you know, or were you just negligent? Was it intentional, as you're saying? So he is playing this out, it sounds like, a bit in the court of public opinion, which is
Right.
back to the Theranos and what's her name? Elizabeth Holmes. She's also pregnant twice. That's playing it out in court of public opinion, trying to make look like a good mother. She's trying to say she was God under the inducement of Sunny Balwani, right? So she was trying to use these things, saying it wasn't my mental state. Was not of appropriate mental state when I made these actions. I was kind of trying to imply that. And it just depends on, as you said, how much regulation directly applies to what he did. And so this is going to be unraveling, the exact causes of action, what regulations apply. It's not just straight, oh, crypto wasn't regulated or something like that. He's doing actions and, managing funds, et cetera, that are regulated. And he also lied. So, lying to investors, taking money, and just a shit ton of negligence. So it's going to depend. And then you're going to, as you said, play out those mental.
If that plays out, does he end up making the CEO the I forget what the name of the girl, that 23-year-old girl?
He
Does
could
he end
throw
up
her under the
making her?
bus. He could throw her under
Okay,
the bus and make her a fall girl.
okay.
But that's like he might be given some sort of immunity or lesser punishments if he rats out or gives evidence. That's standard, though. That's completely standard in these types of cases. Rolling over on somebody. I mean, look at Joe Sullivan over at Uber that just got that criminal penalty. I mean, that's likely because he wouldn't roll over on the other executives because that was so out of line with what happened. So this stuff happens a lot, and that's just taken into account in the sentencing.
for
And
those listening
somebody
who
at
may
that
not?
level, at 22 years old, if you said, wow, as a COO, I'm certain they'd get a lot of sympathy if he passed it on to her and then she passed it on as I didn't know and I was too young. So, I mean,
No, it depends. They took people's stuff, and people are going to look at it and go, "Yes," but there's going to be that the flip side of that is, look, you if you were so young, you knew that. Why did you take this role? Why did you do this? Like I don't
I
know.
concur with what your opinion on the prosecutors, but the common jury, we'll see. I mean, they're stroking the sympathy thing. I mean,
No,
at
but they
least
were so negligent. I mean, beyond negligent, right? They were intentional. And in doing things. These are educated. Okay, they're young, but we had this discussion before. They're young, but they're young adults. And they both came from big, educated and experienced backgrounds, even for their ages. But you're right; they are going to play. To your point, there is very much a court of public opinion and sympathy. Sympathy roles, as well as do they cooperate with the prosecution? Do they cooperate? You know, in disclosure during the diligence here, as well as rolling over on other people, etc. So you're right. There's a lot going on here.
so. Jennifer, see what I don't see is, do you remember Michael Milliken and all those guys back in the day when they were loved, but they were eventually hated because there was like a movement of like, oh, bad Wall Street, bad this, bad that. There is no outside. I haven't seen it. Public movement saying naughty guys, you guys are horrible, blah blah blah.
Oh, I'm
Um,
seeing it. I'm
you
absolutely
are.
seeing it. I talk about it all the time. That Silicon Valley and their throw water on them exploding amount of unethical CEOs down there. Yeah, I'm seeing it. That's but then again, I'm in the heat of it down here, and maybe that's why it looks bigger. But you're also seeing it. You know, people love to what do they call it? The sharp, the word when people like to feel better based on other people's downfalls. You're seeing that.
Oh, dance on their graves. Yeah.
Yeah, the shark and whatever it's called. But yes, not
So
quite
you
that
see
level.
the shark circling.
Well, they're
Hey
just
Kim,
they're throwing it on crypto, but there is a bit these people who are getting just billions, and then there's also building this out of context because it really, how big is it? It's not that big in the global economy, but it is high profile. But we'll see.
Robert, what you have to also remember about the Milken time period is that we had the collapse of the S&Ls, and there was some prominent S&Ls like Columbia Savings that had
good
bought
point.
junk bonds and Executive Life and all of that, and so they blamed the junk bonds on that. Okay, even though I think there was more than, quite frankly, on that issue, I blame the bankers, the people who had fiduciary responsibilities about what they were buying to know what they were buying. But yes, but that was one of the differences. Yeah, thanks.
So unpicking this is fascinating. It is interesting, though, how many things, if you take, again, get banging on the same drum, a first principles approach, you don't have to bother with all of this because at the end of the day, digital money, the whole solution of consensus that Bitcoin came up with was that if money is going to be digital, basically a number, the fact that I own money just comes down to a number. If I own Bitcoin, I just have a number in my private possession. It's a long number, but it's just a lump number somewhere that no one else can get to it. And the whole difficulty of that is if anyone else gets hold of that number, they also have access to the money. It's very much like how many sets of house keys do you have, right? If you have the keys, it's different to the fiat world, of course, because in the fiat world, if somebody else has my house keys and they break in, we've got the land registry deeds and whatever, and the police will go and kick them out. But in the crypto world, if somebody else has your keys, they have access, and it's as much their house as it is yours, as much their money as it is mine. I am confident that a lot of these problems were caused by not adhering to the very basic principle that forget not your keys, not your coin. That doesn't encapsulate it. But got your keys, got your coin. Anybody who, if you're going to lend money for a yield, somebody else, two people now have to have the
Actually
same sets of
enjoy
keys.
doing demos.
And if
They get the banana smoothie, and it's kind of a fun game. So um, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like we care a great deal about animal welfare, and
okay, I think
I'm
Tyler's playing
pretty
something out
sure
loud. So yeah, the point is, I think
like
two
I'm
sets two
pretty
sets of
happy,
people have got the
So
keys is the problem.
as you can see, quick.
Sorry about that. I'm watching the Neuralink.
Yeah, no problem. I was saying that I think fundamentally the idea that people don't understand that the whole solution of digital money is that you can solve the problem that if money is just a number, how the hell do you make sure it doesn't get spent twice? That multiple people don't have that number? Because owning Bitcoin is just owning a number. This whole problem is caused by more than one person having access to that same number. You cannot yield and lend your money out without two parties, i.e. the lender and the lendee having access to that number. And it's gone completely off the
That
rails.
would be the borrower, Ben.
Yeah, okay. Well, I like making up words. It's much easier than recalling the correct ones. I'm English. I can make up new words. Am I the only
Oh, okay.
Englishman on this
You're
freaking
in
stage?
charge
No,
of
no.
the
Pilsner,
language.
Pilsner.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in charge of the language, exactly. We make it complicated and incomprehensible, and you guys simplify it.
Yeah, I'm not the smartest cookie in the knife drawer, but yeah, I love making up language. That's good.
Oh, and by the way, for anybody talking about language,
Joke.
anybody wondering what we were saying, Jennifer and I, mens rea, or rea is Latin for, I think, what is it, guilty mind or something? It is not mens rea as in the
Mental state.
bottoms of,
It's
the
your mental
bottoms of,
state. It's
yeah,
your
not
mental
the
state. So
bottoms
what
of
was
males. Yeah.
no? It's not. Yeah, it's not men's. We're not getting out over to that side, but good point, Ben. No, it's your mental state, which can
Just for
range.
people who are listening, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's intent. Like in law, it would range from intentional. So you knew what it was, you knew what you're doing, and you did it. And that can actually be transferred intent. If I get in a car and I've had some drinks and I kill somebody, they're going to say my intent to put that drink to my lips. They're going to transfer that intent and say I intended to kill somebody. So it gets dicey, but it's down to negligence or willful negligence, gross negligence. To no intent, etc. So again, there's varying levels, and that's what would need to be depending on what went on here with Sam Bankman. To the extent that that's a factor, that's what they'll have to look at.
Or soon, if the Chinese surveillance gets better as fast as it is, we won't need to worry about deducing after the fact what was in someone's mind. You'll just go and look it up on their smartphone that's plugged into their brain, and that'll tell you what was in their mind, whether they have a guilty mind.
So it's not just shady or stupid; it's knowingly shady or
Pretending to be
knowingly stupid
stupid.
or unknowingly shady or
Yeah,
unknowingly stupid.
Yeah, well,
I saw that interview. I just don't believe this guy. I mean, I know that there are people out there, Bill Ackman, saying, "Oh yeah, he just was just a young person who made a mistake." Whatever. No, no, I'm just not believing him. By the way, he said more than once in that interview that he did it with Andrew Ross Sorkin that the U.S. subsidiary was solvent. I mean, I'd love to see proof of that because, and by the way, solvent has a very specific meaning, and I think he probably actually was very deliberate in his choice of words, kind of like Bill Clinton in how he
Yeah,
defined
yeah.
sex or something. No, no, seriously, solvent simply means that the balance sheet assets exceed liabilities. That doesn't mean the balance sheet assets have to actually be tangible. Okay, if he's got goodwill or he's got some other intangibles on that balance sheet, if he develops some software or trading system that he capitalized as a soft asset, he he'll say, "Well, yeah, I said we were solvent. Our assets, exceed liabilities. None of the assets are, it's not like we have cash or anything, but we're solvent." Because there's a difference between solvent and liquid. Those are actually two different terms, and so it's a very interesting choice of words. But I mean, obviously they're in bankruptcy for a reason, okay, and you can't get your money out for a reason. So I doubt they have the liquidity there, to pay off the claims.
Yeah, but what about the fact that
Can
Bahamas, you were able to get your money out if you're in the Bahamas or something? Or is that not relevant?
Well,
wait, can
that's
I go back to the solvency, Ken? Is that because wasn't a big part of this that they were issuing their own coin and then lending it back? And I forgot the circular nature of what they were doing there, but they were basically lending their money to themselves via the transfer of their own coin and valuing it at a
to,
value
to
that,
relate it to related party entities, right? So again, a soft asset. You know what I'm saying? A soft asset. It's
right.
yeah. So yeah, and I think Piotr had a question. I think the government down there sees what may have been worth anything, right? So some people might be able to get some money out because the government stepped in, to take what they could that may have actually had any value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cal Patel wants to remind everybody of the very noteworthy point that SBF's parents are both professors at Stanford Law School.
It was mentioned
Oh,
in
Yes,
the
I
so they're
thought
interview.
it
not
said that.
typical. They're not typical parents,
It
especially when you
was
say
mentioned
law.
in the interview, and he said that they're still behind him.
Well, by the way, they
The
may
point,
have
Yeah,
he still did
culpability
what he
there.
did. Maybe this just makes it worse, right? Because he did what he did with. I'm sure he talked to his parents. Maybe he didn't. We don't know that. But they were both at Stanford Law, and I think focused on ethics. One of them, or I heard that, but that could be wrong. But they were at Stanford Law, which I think we all know is a very prestigious law school. So if he was talking to them about this, plus their contacts, and the girl, the CO or whatever she was, her dad worked for what's his name, the head of the SEC. I mean, these guys had pedigreed advisors. Now, which direction does that go for them? Arguably they knew more of what they were doing, but then it's not that they're more liable because of their parents. They did what they did. That just provides, back to the earlier discussion, more background on their mental capacity, maybe, or their thought process. It doesn't change what they did.
But
Yeah,
isn't it
but
a
but,
bit of
but
a
apparently his parents
stretch
his
though?
parents got a house. His parents got a house out of
Yes.
some of this money
They're
that he was
yep.
asked about. So it's a very expensive house. So his parents may actually have culpability there if they, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask who bought the property in the Bahamas?
There's a
Yeah.
bunch of properties in the Bahamas, right? That was all underwritten, which again, I've heard interviews that that's not that abnormal for a company, but maybe it is. I mean, it looks like maybe they overdid it, but I don't know if it's correct. Ken, you might know, be able to
No, but he was
comment.
asked about why his parents were living in one of those expensive houses, and you could see him he was very labored in his like explanation, trying to say, well, maybe they did, or I think they did some work for the company, or they did, he was like, he was trying to like not tie them to it, but then try to justify why they were in this. If you're saying it's corporate housing, then he's trying to justify why his parents were in the corporate housing. Okay. I mean, he couldn't have it both ways, it was, I mean, I thought the interview was terrible. And I tweeted something out on it yesterday. I said, literally, I mean, it reminds me a little bit, for those of us that are old enough, or we've seen it, well, we've seen films, quite frankly, because even for me, I had to see it on film because I wasn't really, was too young, or if I wasn't even alive. But, if you ever see some of these films of POWs, from Vietnam, and then the Vietnamese put them on television, and they're giving interviews. They're still being held, by the Vietnamese. Okay, he seemed like a POW that was still in captivity, giving an interview on television. I mean, that's what it appeared to me. Slightly better than that, but not a lot.
So heavily under duress, not making a bit much pile of sense. Like that analogy, Ken.
And he didn't get on a plane. Damn it. So they couldn't pick him up at the airport.
I think on the houses point, Jennifer, from what I remember reading, they had like several quite large scale apartments, which sort of one or two might make sense if it's sort of, for a specific reason or there's a group of them, but they were literally like just all in this one like boat certain dock area. And from what I do remember as well, the parents did sort of come down sometimes, and half of them were empty as well. So it's a bit unclear as to what was going on there. But he liked to do this image stuff of him lying on the beanbag or whatever it was and sleeping, and he constantly goes to events in his shirt and shorts and sandals or whatever he wears and with his stupid hair. So it was all quite publicly done to give off this sort of studenty vibe, make it more appealing for younger investors. And now maybe he's going to try and play that card by sort of like, oh, it was, I didn't mean it, or I was just a bit naive, sort of rhetoric.
I read one story that the day everything collapsed, his father flew down to the Bahamas and was seen crying to somebody in a restaurant. Nobody remembers that but me.
I remember reading that headline.
So, what would a parent be crying
Okay.
about, Dr. Francine? Just let's use our imagination. That would be very interesting. What do you think,
Yeah,
Marshall?
exactly. My son lost all his money.
And it might implicate the family,
Right,
or
right.
our images. I have to look that up. Whoever said that possibly one of the parents taught ethics in law. Oh my goodness, this sounds like a great movie.
Well, by the way, some people, I've heard different terms there. Somebody said
Money in
ethics.
right now
Some
include
what's
Upstart,
his name
that is
from
one,
Shark Tank?
Tesla,
Kevin
MGM, and
O'Leary said
AIG.
that
Why
they
those
taught
four, all
compliance,
of which you
but
bought
then
within
somebody else
weeks,
who wrote
this week,
about it said no. Actually,
and
they were teaching tax
yeah, so
shelters.
well,
I
Upstart
believe
jumped
the
from about
tax shelter one.
25%
That's
just in 4
probably
days.
Well,
Since you
let's
bought it, we
let's
put it
put it
in
this way,
above
Ken.
Why don't
All
4K.
you
three
go
of
and
those.
see
It's
If
her
you
still
had
fantastic.
if
their
you had
LinkedIn
parents teaching
profile?
all
Moving
three of those,
short term, probably
I
a little
mean,
exaggerated now.
I mean, why don't you
Longer
go and
term,
see their LinkedIn profile
that's
or just look
a
at
good
their
looking
professional
name.
profile?
Well,
See
and
Very
what
also I
powerful,
think you're
very
right
strong
that there is
earnings.
the tax shelter stuff.
What do they do? I don't
Regardless
even
of
know
whether
them.
they
What do they
teach,
do?
they're personally teaching ethics or not. That
Excuse me.
in
What does
theory,
Upstart do?
especially at academia, the
Well,
requirement that lawyers comply with ethics
sorry.
is always a
What
big
kind of
discussion
company is
point.
it?
I mean, I don't know that there's
I'm not.
plenty of
You're
unethical
breaking up.
attorneys,
Oh,
but for them to be at
you've got
Stanford
an
and have this
audio.
happen
You
again,
want that to
Stanford
start?
top what, number 2 or 3 law school, so definitely top five. So this is very public, but and again, corruption like this stuff happens throughout the valley a lot, and the attorneys and VCs are highly involved in it. I mean, I personally have experienced it, so it's we can talk about it from like our vantage points. There's just are a lot of vantage points to this.
Yeah, but I mean, at this scale and with someone of this ilk in this kind of way, I mean, there's quite a lot of things that make it a unique case, no?
Oh, I think it's awesome.
I have
This
no
is
idea.
huge, huge,
I have no idea.
huge, huge. But I'm just saying it's not. it's not the only one it happens, but at this scale and at this involvement, I mean, I would look at this and go, they're idiots, but they're clearly not idiots, right? I mean, but to look at this and go, between, it doesn't get better. And, Michael, what's his name? Michael Lewis is writing the book, so that should be out soon, but, or who knows when, and they're shopping around the movie rights. So we'll see when that comes out. But it's, both of his parents are Stanford Law School professors, and I think that was correct. At least one in tax shelters. And seriously, her dad worked for Gary Gensler in the past and was, I think, the head of the economics department at MIT, but I could be wrong on that, but something like that. So the background here this is amazing.
Yeah, Gary Jens was the head of the SEC for people who don't know.
And guess the back room, the conversations probably that have been going on long before all this stuff came out because all these families and people are linked. Even if they didn't talk about it directly, but indirect. Wow, it's so many people probably need to be recused from this thing.
By the way, I was amazed. The other thing he mentioned in the interview that his company didn't have a bank account until like 2 years ago or something, and I'm thinking, you didn't have a bank account until 2 years ago, and all of a sudden you've got a company that's worth 30-40 billion dollars, and people are giving you all this money, and it's like, wow. I mean,
So
what
what
kind of
happened to due diligence, Ken? I mean,
exactly?
why
Yeah.
would these people get money?
Okay, we ready?
Hey,
So the
Tyler,
next
just
one
one last
is
thing.
Elon Musk
In
said.
the area with us normal
Okay.
people that I function with, what a number of them are saying is another example of people who were born not totally into money, but born into a certain class has access to so much for doing so little. And it just proves a point, whether you're talking about gender, whether you talk about all those other social things, about how somebody could get so much for doing so little and not even following the rules, and all the beat down some of these other people who have probably a
White
little bit more
privilege.
legitimate businesses, you know?
White privilege,
Also,
I'll say it.
I'll also point out, I think he's meant to be giving some kind of session to Twitter later this afternoon. So he might say something different since it's a community bunch of listeners, not the media. Who knows?
Okay. So Elon Musk tweeted that he met with Tim Cook at Apple HQ today, and that Cook was clear that Apple never considered removing Twitter from the App Store. So could you please, please, please call off the wolves and the hounds that are now sniffing around about this whole breaking up our oh so lucrative App Store situation? And no, so no doubt, a potential agreement was made that if you're okay with the the 30% tax, we won't be
And by the
shutting
way,
your app
does
down.
does he have to actually charge Twitter 30%? Unless they have deals in place with everybody else for like an MFN status, maybe he's going to charge Twitter less. He is charging smaller app developers less. He's only charging them 15%. So I'm not even sure if he would be obligated to charge Twitter 30%, unless there's an MFN clause somewhere. You know, it, you know, you know what I'm saying?
There was some hubbub about about them treating some
Yeah.
specific large apps differently. But there was something in an article written yesterday about that 30% is for the apps is only for the apps making more than a million, but that it's only for the first year now, and then becomes 15% even for those afterwards. We're investigating that this morning. As a matter of fact, I had somebody go check into it.
Yeah, to Ken's point, for people who don't know what that is, an MFN is most favored nation. So that means it's a agreements. It's usually done by governments because you have to have a lot of power. But it's to say that you can't charge anybody else more favorably. So if it's here, it would be less than you are charging us, which means so that's the way it's done. But if, and my guess is, if you look at the Twitter or the App Store, sorry, Apple's terms of service that the standard developers apply to. It's going to be template terms that say unless agreed otherwise, or unless you're under a different agreement with us. So most of these big companies save that, and they do with larger clients here or other entities have separate negotiated agreements. And so they have called that out, and that makes it not a violation of their existing terms, that everybody's under the exact same terms. So good call out there, Ken.
Thank you. I also think, as a point of reality, there's a political difference between him, having a situation where Twitter it's thrown off versus or quits over the fee versus Epic Games. The political ramifications of Twitter being off the app versus Epic Games are completely different, and I think Tim Cook knows that.
Well, first, against the elephant in the room is he was never told he was going to be removed off the app. That
No, I was
the
saying even
comment.
theoretically,
Okay,
yes,
he
yeah.
made this all up for publicity, like he does the same thing about Donald Trump and everything else. He's just trying to get more users on Twitter.
That's correct.
Okay. Next up is, according to Gizmodo, Apple's Twitter ad purchases grew from $989,000 in October to $1 million in November. Elon said Apple mostly stopped Twitter ads. So Gizmodo is presenting numbers that they say are incongruent with Elon's tweets.
I don't know if it was them but there's somebody leaking information about ad spend from Twitter, and they sent out yesterday that the day that he tweeted that they're reducing their spend was actually a day they actually went up, that they spent the most they'd ever spent.